So before we do that, we need to think about some background here, which is going to be the distinction between ideal and non-ideal theory. So this is a distinction that comes from the philosopher John Rawls, who's introduced it in ethics and political philosophy. So we've seen already that the main arguments for segregated sports come from concerns about fairness. So we spoke last time in the previous lecture about these fair play arguments, um, and how it would be unfair to force people to um, compete against people who have biological advantages over them without any adjustments. Um, and we also seen arguments that segregated sports are required to allow girls to access the benefits of sports. Specifically, we looked at the distinction between basic and scarce benefits as advocated for by Jane English. But we've also seen that segregated sports can also cause problems, especially when establishing the segregation line. So we saw in the last lecture that looking at choosing biological markers for how we distinguish between boys and girls um, can often be more difficult than people would expect. So one of the things that this should lead us to wonder then is to question whether segregation in terms of um, girls having a right to compete in sporting contests that exclude boys is the ideal that we should be aiming for. So even if this is something that might be justified at the moment, there's a question about whether this is something that is the ideal. Is this something that is morally like the best state of affairs that we could have? So Rawls, as I said, gives a distinction between ideal and ideal and non-ideal theory. So this is something that he comes up with to apply to his own work. So he is working on this question of how should we set up societies for this question in political philosophy. And so he says that this is going to be done in two stages. So the first thing that we need to do is work out our ideal theory. So work out what justice requires in the abstract. So without worrying about any concerns about what's achievable now, about what we should be doing now, we need to work out what justice requires in the most general sense. What's the kind of target that we should be aiming for? What's the ideal state of affairs? And then he says that the second step is going to be our non-ideal theory. So now we're going to put back in all of these concerns that we have about, things like historical injustice or the feasibility of certain actions. And we're going to use that in combination with our ideal theory to work out what we should do to get from where we are now to where we want to be. And this has been a very influential distinction that's been made within political philosophy, and it's something that we can kind of think about how we apply here. So the reason why I bring this up is when we think about the moral rights that girls have when it comes to sporting contests, we might think that the ideal theory of what we want in terms of the relationships between girls and boys in sports might be different from our non-ideal theory. So one option, at least, that we could have is to say that in a non-ideal context, perhaps in the short term, then maybe yes, this right to segregated competition is justified. But maybe it's not something that we should be aiming for as the end goal of our understanding of what girls and boys sport should look like.